I told you everything you know about cutting fabric is only half the story? There's a method used by the fashion industry that home sewists rarely try: cutting everything flat. Today, I'm putting it to the test. Is it just a lot of hype or worth the extra effort to up my sewing game? Let's find out. Hi, I'm Tony, and this is So Lounge. Now, the fabric that prompted this entire experiment is this gorgeous wool jersey. It is kind of a lightweight sweater knit. I got this at Mood Fabrics, and I absolutely fell in love with it. This fabric is a panel. So each panel is 1 7/8. I got 2, so I would have enough to make my dress. Now, the thing about using this and cutting everything flat is that I want to make sure that the stripes are lined up straight as they go around my body, not just matching at the side seams, but also making sure that they are even across the center front and center back. The pattern I plan to use is McCall's 7993. This is a sweater knit pattern, so it's going to be the perfect fabric, but because it is a sweater knit, it's heavier than like a regular knit, and cutting it on the fold might be a little bit problematic to keep the stripes lined up. So I thought, let's try the flat cutting method and see what it's all about. If you're having a hard time visualizing what I say when I mean the industry cuts flat, I pulled out my Sewing for the Apparel Industry book and found some pictures to illustrate the differences between cutting in the fashion industry versus cutting for home sewing. This is an example of a Gerber cutting machine, and basically what they're doing is cutting out the pattern pieces so that this piece will all be laid out on top of a stack of multi-layered fabric, and then a drill will be used to cut along the inside edge to make each individual pattern sheet. Now, as you can see, I'll zoom in a little bit farther. The pant is cut singularly because pants are, there's a crotch seam and there's an inside leg and an outside. So those are still cut the same way they would be cut with home sewing. But the tank over here is cut flat. So this is one of those instances where it would be cut on the fold with home sewing, but with commercial, it's more economical to get all these pattern pieces laid out into this mold, which everything will then be cut. This is what they use to cut the fabric. It kind of looks like a jigsaw, but it's a long blade and it goes down along the inside edge of the mold and cuts out the fabric. If you're wondering why fabric is cut this way, it's to make it more economical because they can fit more pattern pieces closer together and get them all cut out at the same time. One of the things when I was flipping through this I thought was interesting is there's a quote at the beginning of the book: "A designer always works behind the bars of a $sign." And that is the difference with industry sewing versus regular home sewing or couture sewing. Now, this book is by Shaeffer. I will put a link in the description below. I got this one at Half Price Books for like $16. Interesting to note that Shaeffer also has a book on couture sewing techniques. So she's covered both ends of the spectrum. And if you want to check this out, there's a lot of interesting tips in this book that maybe we'll delve into at another point in time. To get started, I'm just going to pick up all of my fabric and get it out of the way, because we'll come back to the cutting part once the pattern work is done. Now, I'm going to be using tracing paper. This is ALVIN lightweight tracing paper that I picked up on Amazon. I'll put a link in the description below so you can check it out. And I have started by making sure it is the length of the pattern piece and wide enough for it to be folded in half. So I'm just going to fold it in half real quick and put a crease down the center front. If you're wondering, this tracing paper is 36 inches wide. It does fit the entire width of the top of my sewing table, and it is definitely wide enough for this pattern piece to be cut, to be traced off on the crease. So to do this, I have my pattern piece all prepped. I did trim the center front all the way to the line, so there's no edge on it, because I'm going to put this into the crease that I have folded in my paper and get it in there nice and snug before I start the whole tracing process. I am going to put a couple of pins in this just to kind of hold it in place so that it doesn't move as I am tracing it. I am going to flip it over and trace from the other side. Okay, it's not too close to the bottom. You just scooch it over just a tiny bit right here at the bottom. Okay. Next step, I'm going to transfer all of the marks onto my tracing paper for this side of the pattern. Now, one thing you want to make sure that you do if you're going to try this out is draw a new grain line that matches up with this center edge of the pattern, because this is what we're going to use for the grain once we get everything in there. Next, I'm going to draw off the lengthen or shorten line at the waist, or just above the waist. And I'm going to mark off the waistline as well and the waist point marking so that I know where that is once I get the pattern cut. I'm going to move up and draw in all the straight lines first. This is very similar to tracing off your pattern, if you are familiar with that process or if that's something you do. So in this instance, if you were going to trace off your pattern anyway, all you're doing differently is marking it on one side and putting the paper on the inside to, have a duplicate on the opposite side. So I'm going to freehand some of this in because it's a little bit faster. And when I'm drawing this, I want to make sure that my line is nice and thick because I am going to go back in and trim everything down. Also transferring all of the marks onto my pattern pieces with the notches and all the markings to be able to properly attach the sleeve and the neckband. So those are the other pieces to this. This pattern is very basic. It is a front and a back, a neckband, and a sleeve, and then the sleeve cuff. So it's not super complicated, which is one reason I chose it, because I am going for a quick win. And I think that the cutting part of it is going to take a little bit longer than the actual sewing part, but hey, that's okay. So moving down to the bottom, this is where I would cut the pattern if I was going to be adding a band on the bottom of it for view A or B. I'm going to be making view C. So it does not have a band, but my plan is to use the black band on the bottom of the fabric and lay it out at this point so that it looks like I cut a band without having to add that extra step and having to cut that additional pattern piece. I am using these erasable red pencils that are my absolute favorite for this process. You can see the red really well once everything is traced off, and best part, they are really, truly erasable if you get your line a little too thick or if you go off slightly. I'll put a link in them in the description below for those as well. Just double checking, everything is marked on this side. It all looks good. So I'm going to flip it over carefully. And I want to make sure that everything is still where it's supposed to be. It looks like my pins have kept everything in place. And now I'm just going to basically repeat the process and trace off the lines from the right side for the, so we had the right center front, and now we're doing the left front by tracing all the markings through the wrong side of the pattern. So I'm going to start with the same process of putting in the various lines that are printed on the pattern, connecting them to the center front, and just getting everything lined up so that once we cut it all out, we know that everything is in the same place across the center front. One little extra step I decided to do was to line up the edge of my ruler with this fold line and just draw in a center front at the waist and the neckline. I'm going to be using my rotary cutter to cut this all out and stay on the outside of the line so that I'll still be able to see it. That is kind of the beauty of cutting with tracing everything off with a pencil, is that it's a little bit easier to see, especially when it's red. So I'm probably gonna still err on the side of caution and just leave a little bit of the edge next to the line. I can cut that off once we get to the fabric cutting part because I'll still be able to see it. And then we'll be ready to open it for the big reveal. Flip this over, take these pins out. I'm gonna pull my pattern piece out from the inside. And then we're gonna unfold this. So now we have the whole flattened piece that is ready to be laid out on the fabric. I am going to go back and true up these lines. So I have my pattern piece all trued up. I have all the lines marked. That's going to help me line up each pattern piece with the stripes of the fabric. So next I need to get my fabric laid out, and then we're going to move on to the next step of laying out each individual piece, getting it lined up, and then starting the cutting process. Now comes the challenge, because my table is 36 inches wide, my fabric is 58 inches wide, and while I could run it the length of the table, which is definitely wide enough for the entire width of the fabric, that would mean that part of my pattern is going to be hanging off the table. And so when deciding between, the lesser of two evils, I'm going to opt to have my pattern piece on the table and part of my fabric hanging off the table, which some people recommend against. I'm going to be very careful, and I'm going to use some pattern weights to hold my fabric so that it is not pulling. I might actually even go get a stool or something to put under that side of the table to hold the fabric so that it's keeping everything straight and not stretching my fabric as I'm trying to cut it. If you are not familiar with knits, knit rolls to the right side of the fabric. So this is the right side of this fabric. The wrong side is equally pretty. It's actually a little bit more white, but you can see that the pattern is a little bit more blurred, meaning that that's the wrong side, and the curl of the knit is rolling towards the right side. So just something to keep in mind. You can use whatever side you want, obviously, but I like the more graphic nature of this side, and it's less blurry. So this is what my system is looking like. I have a TV tray down here with my second panel on it. You can see the first panel ends about halfway through this black mark. And then I have the side, which is hanging over draped on the back of my chair, because I'm trying to relieve some of the pressure of that. I'm gonna tuck some of this up back over here. And that'll just help it from stretching. I do have my fabric lined up here along this edge of my mat. And I'm going to now proceed to the next step of laying out my first pattern piece. All right, so I started laying this out and realized I need more lines on this pattern. So I redrew the center front line all the way from the top to the bottom, and then I used my T-square to make sure everything is perfectly on line and perfect right angles to each other. And now I'm just going and repeating that process on the back, because I did not do that on the back either. I think this is going to make laying everything out a lot easier when I can see the grain line on the line on the fabric with the grain line from the pattern piece, and get everything all lined up so that it is I know that it's where it's supposed to be. This fabric is a little bit challenging because it's not, every line isn't printed exactly the same. So there's some slight variation to where the lines show up vertically, and I need to just make sure the pattern is in the right place and then work from that, as opposed to trying to get all of the lines matched through the pattern pieces and hoping they're straight. I'm just gonna put the lines on the pattern and then I know that they're straight, and then we will take it from there. Okay, so now all of my lines are in, and I'm going to try this again, and hopefully everything works this time around. All right, so I think that was definitely the way to go. It is much easier to see the lines with them going all the way through each pattern piece. So I'm just gonna do my best to get this lined up on some of these points and see how this works. I definitely think, just so far, very basic getting started with all of this, I think that the flat cutting is the way to go with this fabric in particular, because it's a challenge to see, and I don't think that it would be perfectly lined up if it was on the fold, for sure. Like, I don't see that happening. I think that would have been like an unbelievable challenge. Just check it from the other side. Make sure everything still looks good. Now that that side is done, I'm gonna start sliding very carefully, sliding my fabric over. I think that should be enough. Good, because now I can get this piece on as well. Let's see if I can match up the stripes again on this side. So I'm just basically repeating the process, making sure that this waistline is matched the same, that this bottom line is matched the same. This bottom line does not look as straight as the other bottom line. So I probably need to go revisit that really quickly. Let me just double check this line. I don't want to have everything all matched up and not have an even line down here. I know that the other hem had a slight curve in it, so that may be what is throwing off my eye a little. Okay, yeah, now they're lining up. So that was the thing. Next time I do this, if I do this process again for a fabric like this, I need to just double check that I have all the lines in the right place, because truing that up from the beginning is definitely the way to go. Okay, now for the slightly stressful part, I'm gonna start the cutting. Here we go. Wish me luck. So I've pulled my front pattern piece back onto the table. I do need to kind of readjust because some of the pins moved a little bit and it got a little crinkled, but I do have it on the same line here that I had on my other piece, and everything is all smoothed out now and ready for cutting. So I have my collar band, and I was thinking that I can kind of do each side different and then see which one looks best with the front neckline, like the center front of the top, and then use whichever one looks better because I'm folding it. I could make it go one way or I could make it go the other way. So I'm kind of putting it so that the stripe is across, just the triple stripe is on one side, and on the other side is kind of the little variegated kind of crosshatch end. And then we'll just see which one looks better because I think they'll both look good. And it's just gonna be, I should probably move this over and reserve fat. I'm gonna move this over. I had it all pinned down and ready to go. My camera died, and so I've been waiting for it to recharge, and then, you know, drawing lines on my other pattern pieces that I'm going to cut out flat. But I think that I'm going to go with the let's use as much of the fabric as possible. And that way there might be some left over that I could make like a skirt or a top or something else out of. Because I think I'm going to have more fabric than I need for this project. I only needed like 2 1/8 yards, and so it came out to be a lot more than that just because of the way that the panels were cut. So, all right, I'm gonna get this lined up again. I'm gonna pretty much do the same thing, keep this on the stripe. And this is one of my favorite parts about sewing, is being able to do this kind of thing that, you know, no one else will have a dress that looks like this. Even if they buy the same fabric at Mood, or even if they use the same pattern, cutting flat was definitely the way to go with this fabric, because I think it's gonna give me a very designer look by matching the different stripes and keeping it all like continuous, but then still having the flexibility to be able to cut out the pieces the way that I want. And so what I was thinking next, so I've got the band up here. My panel resumes here as I previously stated. Let me pull this over a little bit. I've got the sleeve pattern, here it is. And what I was thinking might look really kind of cool would be to do the pleated part of the sleeve, because the bottom of the sleeve is going to be, there are pleats in it, and so it's going to be gathered into the cuff. And I thought that would look kind of cool if it was all black, and then have the top of the cuff be black and then go back into the print. And I think I have enough fabric to do that, and then I'm still going to have a good amount of yardage after that. So I did draw my lines on my sleeve. So that is going to be all ready to go. And so I think I'm just going to get it lined up here. And that's going to put the pleats down in the black section, which I think will look really cool. And then, so the bottom of the sleeve is black, and then the top of the cuff is black, and then there's going to be more print on the bottom. I think that's going to look really neat. So that's what we're going to go with. And I'm going to get this lined up here because then the pleat, this is all where it needs to be. And I did draw all the lines on this as well so that I could keep it all straight. I'm going to have to flip this piece over to be able to cut it again. So I just want to mark, well, I mean, I know which side's the right side because it's the gray side and not the white side, so that'll be fine. So I got to mark all these pleats, but for now that looks good. And then this piece would go down here, and so they'd connect up, so then the cuff would be black. But once again, I can flip it if I want it to be black and kind of have that gray on the bottom. So that's what I'm looking at there. I think that would look really cool. And I might just get that all lined up and get it all cut, and then we'll flip the other sleeve. And then the cutting part of this is all going to be done, which will be exciting. So I've got all these pieces ready to go. Let's get them cut out and then flip everything. So I'm using this SARAL, I don't know how to say it, transfer paper. It is wax free. I just got the kind that comes in the roll, so it's not these little tiny squares, which seem to run out pretty quickly. And it is very large and in charge. So I'll put a link below for that. This is what I like to use to transfer marks with. So I'm gonna knock out these pleats real quick and get them all marked into place, and then also do my sleeve marking so I can finish cutting this out. And then, you know, see how everything looks and make an evaluation as to whether or not this is a method I would use again. I have transferred all of my marks onto my fabric, and now it's time for the big reveal to take the paper off and see how everything looks. All right, so this is the front panel. That looks pretty awesome. I think it's gonna look really good once I get it all sewn up. Looks like the middle band is the dark band through the middle, so that's gonna be more flattering. Now, of course, we have to check and see how it matches on the side with the back piece, but I am very optimistic that this process worked. I'm just going to pin these sides together at the notches real quick, and then we will unfold for the big reveal. Okay, I think this is gonna be enough. So let's see. Oh, that's looking pretty perfect. So I think it definitely was worth the effort in this case to cut the pattern flat so that I could get the lines all where they need to be. And I'm sure that the collar will look equally cool once we get that unfolded. Now, is this something you're gonna try? Let me know in the comments below. I'm not sure that I would do this for every single pattern, but in an instance where the print placement or the stripe placement in this case is crucial to my design aesthetic, then I think it's definitely worth the time and effort. Now, if you want to learn more about sewing with knits, you can check out this video coming up next. It's full of super helpful tips. I know you're going to love it, and I'll see you over there.